Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Headline Geopolitics. I'm your host, José Niño, and this evening I have the pleasure of being joined by a very special guest, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. How are you this evening, Karen?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
So, I've followed your work for some time now, and what I like about it is that you have a good inside and outside perspective, if you will, given your experience in the Air Force and working in the Pentagon. Could you expand on your overall background and what got you into the military, and then what made you transition towards critiquing U.S. foreign policy?
Yeah, well, I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and I was commissioned in 1982. So that was during the Cold War. And I had a ROTC scholarship, like a lot of people, you need help paying for college, and that's how I did that. And my dad had been in the Navy as an enlisted guy for 4 years before I was born. So, I thought highly, my whole family thought highly of the military. So anyway, got the scholarship, did ROTC, got commissioned, and I was stationed in Alaska, actually. Eielson was my first assignment, and I was designated to be a communications electronics officer. Now, this was before the internet, so, I don't know how relevant a lot of that would be. But anyway, so I had, some fun times, enjoyed the military. My first sense that something might be a little bit strange about the government, and I was not a libertarian. I consider myself a Republican only because I had been raised in that environment. But I had an assignment in the, I guess starting in 86 or 7, up in Massachusetts, Hanscom Air Force Base, doing acquisitions. Mm-hmm. And the amount of, bureaucracy, number one, was just amazing. And the amount of waste, and what I would probably consider fraud too, but waste, that would be something that concerned me quite a bit. And I was working in, in fact, I actually was rewarded, like on paper, for finding waste and eliminating it. But it was so much, and nobody really cared. It's funny. Anyway, so that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth, but still the Cold War hadn't quite ended. Meanwhile, I was working on my second master's, and my focus was Eastern European and Russian studies to some extent within the Harvard government program. So while I was studying that, the wall was falling down, the late 80s. This is a very exciting time. So, and I had some expectations during that time of what might happen when communism fell, when the Soviet Union fell. And just like I was surprised at the waste and the bureaucracy, I was then also surprised that things like, when the Warsaw Pact went away, I thought NATO would go away, right? I thought, well, wait a minute. But no, NATO expanded almost immediately. So again, it's like, well, I'm questioning my assumptions, because what I'm assuming is going to happen from what I thought was a rational point of view, my understanding of government at that time, did not happen. The opposite happened. So that was interesting. And then I had some overseas assignments. I came back to NSA. And I guess I could tell you a little bit about NSA. I mean, I was surprised that we had back doors into everybody's software. I mean, you don't think the government's spying on you. But we absolutely were. And I'll tell you this, too. Another interesting assumption that NSA itself made. It was a big issue when I was there. This would have been in the very late 80s. Mid 90s was at NSA. And of course, we had the internet by then. And one of the concerns that NSA had at that time, and this will be interesting to all the modern people who don't think of this as an issue, because it's not an issue. The marketplace made it not an issue. But at the time, NSA was very worried that bandwidth would run out. We were going to run out of bandwidth. They did not foresee the compression. They did not see the technical ability to transmit massive amounts of data, really on the backbone we had for the most part. And they didn't really see what was coming in terms of satellite communications and just the whole network. They did not see it because they're government bureaucrats, okay? They're military people, military officers, senior military officers. Their imagination level is very limited. So we were very worried at NSA that bandwidth would run out. There would not be enough ability to store data, to transmit data. And certainly that was a problem for us. But of course, that problem went away. Their assumption was wrong in that case. And then I went to the Pentagon and I worked at the Air Staff in operations. That was the most fun job I ever had, working with a bunch of guys, and they told me all kinds of stories. And these guys are pilots, navigators, logisticians. There were all kinds of folks that we worked with, and just a lot of fun. And then I went over to the Office of Secretary of Defense. That was my last assignment. I worked in sub-Saharan Africa, got a few trips in, and again, much as had happened previously, I began to see things that didn't jive with what I really thought was right. And it was kind of how we treated, I don't know, in some ways it was how we treated our countries that were our quote unquote allies. And I actually wrote a book while I was there on the African Crisis Response Initiative, which was military training for a whole bunch of friendly allied countries in Africa. And I don't believe it exists anymore, but one of the claims to fame of that program is a number of our graduates and participants later couped their democratically elected governments.
Oh, wow.
This is similar to what I didn't have any experience or exposure to Central America, but it's similar to what people saw in Central America, I think, in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And maybe past then. But anyway, so that was that. And then what really changed everything is I got pulled over, not as a volunteer. And I think that's important because when you're drafted, you have no loyalties. I was drafted to fill a position in the North Africa, in the South, what was it? NISA, Near East South Asia. It was the office under Bill Lutey who, that we did Israel and Iran and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. And I had the North Africa desk. So I had come from Central Africa, that they put me in the North Africa desk, which was pretty inconsequential at that time. And that is, and of course, I was there in the Pentagon during 9/11. So that was 2001. And then, of course, after that, we kicked into war gear. Well, we actually had been in war gear prior to 9/11. But anyway, kicked into war gear. And of course, it was Afghanistan, right? Because we blamed it on, who was it? The Al-Qaeda guy, bin Laden. And he was being harbored by Afghanistan. So even though there were no Afghanis on any planes, we had no evidence that any Afghanis had done anything, we invaded Afghanistan. And we only just got out of there, I think, under when did Biden disastrously pull the troops? It's, a $3 trillion escapade. We spent $3 trillion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. So
yes,
that's the funny story. That's the the meme that goes around. It's not a meme; it's a true fact. So anyway, they wanted to go into Iraq, and as they prepared the lies, I was right in the middle of the office that was, taking the intelligence, cherry picking it, manipulating it, not confirming it or confirming it with itself. Self-confirming type intelligence, which is not what you would consider vetted. And they would feed it not just to the Congress and the White House, they would feed it to the media at the same time. I mean, we had talking points that would be marked secret, top secret. And you would see you would see verbatim from these things on the front page of the Times and the Post, because it was manipulative propaganda that they needed to get out there to get the people on board with this unwarranted and inexcusable invasion of Iraq. The second invasion, not the 1991 one, but the one that George W. Bush did. So anyway, at that point, I'd had it. Now, granted, I guess it all built up, and I started publishing anonymously with Colonel Hackworth's website, Soldiers for the Truth, and he's passed since then. He's gone, but he set me up with a what do you call it? A login. I mean, it was a little blog thing, and I posted it right from the Pentagon, right from my computer. So anyway, it's funny, but I had to be anonymous because I was not revealing classified at all. Well, if I was revealing classified, then so was the New York Times and the Post, because I was seeing the same exact material. But it was critical. I was very critical. I was poking fun. It was dark humor. It was nasty. I mean, not nasty, but it was not submissive. I was not having it, and I was making humorous jokes about it and other stuff, and I was telling people what they were doing. And of course, I caught the attention of certain people. Of course, Hackworth knew this was happening because he had probably had 20 or 30, maybe more people inside the Pentagon that were his friends. And he knew this was happening. There were some media, who was it? I don't think that company exists anymore, but one of the news one of the media companies, I can't remember the name of it. They had a number of city newspapers. They were actually doing a good job on this. And I think they later made a movie about it years later. Shock and Awe, I think it was the movie. So those guys they were paying attention to this stuff. And so they reached out to me. Anyway, none of this I couldn't have done it that openly today, because since all that happened, they've changed the computer systems, the way you log in, the way you use the system. They are very scared of whistleblowers inside the system. I'll tell you that right now. Very, very frightened of them. And some of the ones they sent to jail, some of the young people, the one guy, Texiera, I think a guard guy, there was a couple others. They did not do what Snowden did. Snowden was very prepared. He understood how the system would react to leaks and truth-telling. But some of these guys, they just are feeling it. They say, this is wrong, I must say something. And they're not protecting themselves, and they're doing it in a way that they're spending time in jail for. So, and I feared that to some extent, but it was a different time in 2002 than it is today. I mean, think about 20 years of, the advances in surveillance technology.
For the worst.
It's massive. I mean, it's huge. But anyway, and then prior to that time, I had become a libertarian in the sense, not a party member libertarian, but I realized that I was a libertarian. I believed, and I guess you could say I was a constitutionalist also. I'm not sure I would say that now, because the Constitution would be a big help if they would follow it. But the fact that they don't have to follow it, and they haven't followed it, our government hasn't followed the Constitution for quite some time. If they don't like something in it, they just ignore it. I mean, think about the War Powers Act. Come on, that's under Nixon. Why does Congress have to say, oh, well, we're not going to amend the Constitution, but we're going to say the president can take us to war for 60 days without telling us if he thinks it's important? Well, that's not what was in the Constitution. So anyway, I'm not quite the constitutionalist that I was. I do think it would help to be followed, but I think we're long past that.
Yeah, just looking back, because the second Iraq War, it seems like almost eons ago, yes, given how fast-paced everything moves these days. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that this war permanently damaged the U.S.'s credibility on the world stage?
The Iraq War? Or the Afghanistan War?
The Iraq War.
The Iraq War in particular. I think it confirmed what a lot of the rest of the world thinks about us. They realize that this is what the rest of the world thinks, I think. I mean, my assessment is that they look at the Iraq War in particular, the second one, and they say, well, why did they have to lie their way into this war? Why did they do it? And they say we did it because of Israel. That's what the rest of the world believes. Now, we also did it, and the rest of the world also gets this, because Saddam Hussein was taking his oil sales off the dollar. He was de-dollarizing. And the rest of the world also noticed that. And of course, Libya, while it was also in the interest of Israel Israel has a program of, I think General Clark said it, 7 countries in 7 years.
Clean break.
Yeah. But they didn't get all those in 7 years, but they did pretty much get all the countries. And it comes from a kind of a greater Israel protection project, to break up all of the potential enemies and make sure they're in governing disarray and fighting amongst themselves, because that enhances zero-sum game. They're misery enhances Israel's ability to cope or whatever. But in Libya in particular, I don't know if you remember, but Gaddafi, right shortly before Hillary and all those went in there and did that, toppled him and treated him so badly. But right before that, and actually for some years, he was very close to putting out a gold African Union currency, a gold-backed currency, which, and it wasn't really a gold-backed currency. He was going to deal with gold. A lot of the African countries have gold, and this was something he was going to do. And why was he going to do it? To get off of the dependency of the dollar and also the controls that come with using the dollar monetary system. And they took him out. Of course, Saddam had said the same things just before they took him out as well. And of course, the very first executive order, so you can check this out, the first executive order that George W. Bush Jr., or George W. Bush, I guess his name is, the first executive order he drafted after we went into Baghdad immediately put all of the oil back on the dollar. And it's very clear. You can go find it and read it. I think we confirmed, we went in March. I think by late June we had control, and that was his executive order. So, and we see this today with Trump. Trump, who knows what goes in Trump's head, but one thing he has said a lot of is he says he talks about the BRICS, right? The BRIC countries making their own currency, trying to sink the dollar. Well, of course, the BRICS aren't trying to sink the dollar. They are seeking some alternatives, some efficient alternatives in trade, and an alternative basket of currencies to the U.S. dollar would help them, particularly as the U.S. doesn't like them and uses the dollar as a weapon. We have weaponized our dollar, and we wonder why people that don't want it used against them are seeking alternative currency. So the BRICS are not trying to de-dollarize to hurt us. They're trying to de-dollarize to preserve and protect and enhance their own economy. But Trump doesn't see it that way because the people around Trump also don't see it that way. And they greatly, greatly fear any challenge to the dollar. And that is not new. This is what makes Trump's, just like Clinton, just like Carter before him, and Nixon, and all these people. And then you can go through the Bush and the George W. Bush, Obama, Biden, all these people. Our empire and our standard of living is based on this dollar that people are forced to have. Dollar as reserve currency. And the threat of our very existence may not be nuclear. It may be monetary. So they're very, it's a big deal. But I'm sorry, I got off track a little bit from your question. But that was a wreck.
Oh, no, yeah, this is a wreck. And it's relevant to fast forward because when we fast forward, due to the fact that we have a person in the Oval Office who ostensibly campaigned against the liberal international neoconservative consensus on foreign policy. Yeah. Trump was campaigning against that at least in 2015 and 2016, talking about ending forever wars and criticizing George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq and the perpetual war in Afghanistan. But now that we have him now for like 2 terms, what do you think about Trump's? How has his performance matched his rhetoric in your view?
Yeah. Well, it's not matched his rhetoric, but I do think he learned a little bit from the first time because he put a lot of people that I think know a little bit about this in it surrounding him. I think he's got better people. Now, at the same time, when you look at what is important to our empire, that would be our money printing capability, the Treasury Secretary. If you look at who's running the Pentagon, which I don't know who actually is running it, but I don't think he put people that are not deep staters or not potentially deep staters. And I know, Pete Hegseth is not a deep stater, but he's also not a person who can really stand up to the deep state. And I don't think he's as astute to deep state forces just within the Pentagon, within his own organization. So what we see with Hegseth is the first thing that he does as Secretary of Defense is asks for more money. Well, that's what the military-industrial complex exactly wants him to do. We're going to, it costs money to retire old expensive systems, and it costs money to make new systems. And I didn't see Pete Hegseth saying we need to end the wars. He's not overly concerned about that. That's, war is profit for the Pentagon. And it's, so that part, I don't think there's been a huge change in terms of the Pentagon. In terms of money, Trump is basically a modern monetary theorist. He believes in modern monetary theory, which is that debt doesn't matter, deficits don't matter. You print the money, and you roll the printers when you need money, and it's all good. It all works out. That is not economically sound. It's not science, but that's what he likes. It's very modern monetary theory is very is something politicians like, because they don't have to make hard decisions. They don't have to do things that the people don't like, at least today. Who doesn't have their hand out today? Later, when they come for all the assets to pay the debt, or the government collapses in some way because of hyperinflation, or whatever the possible outcomes are, then somebody pays for it. Then we're miserable, right? Then we have wars. But Trump doesn't really get that. So he's all about, his actions tell me he's not really about the future, even though his rhetoric is about the future. His rhetoric is, he wants to make America, industrial again, profitable again, free again, safe again, powerful. He wants these things, but the way he's going about it show that he understands nothing about the economy. He kind of can push people around, and I think that's what we've seen. He is used to throwing his weight around, and he's doing that as president in foreign policy, for sure. Because we see, what is it? 6 wars ended in 6 months. That is, of course, not true. But he has sent people to make deals. Okay, and I think if they last, that's good. I'm happy that we have any progress towards peace. And I do give him a lot of credit for talking to Putin. It was unforgivable that Biden, Biden was incompetent. He wasn't there. But the fact that we went, I think, 3 years without even communicating in any way, except by calling them murderers and killers, that's the next biggest nuclear power. Anyway, it was not good what Biden did. And Trump is fostering a relationship where we can at least communicate with each other. I think that's good. But when it comes to messing with the deep state, he's not really doing it. The biggest target would be the Pentagon right now, where the waste and the corruption, the CIA. We were at this conference just the other day, and what did Jeffrey Sachs say? That the CIA, that Truman admitted publicly in, 1963, that the biggest mistake he made was allowing the CIA to have an operational covert ops capability. They should have only been doing intelligence, not covert ops. And those covert ops have taken over. CIA intelligence is totally unreliable and no good, but their covert ops are really keeping the conflicts going around the world so that they can feed the military-industrial complex. This is not a good way to do business, and I don't think Trump gets that.
Yeah, I've always gotten the impression that Trump, he's like a showman, so he's gonna make a lot of noise about ending controversial conflicts and create a whole scene about it, but generally he tends to underdeliver. And I don't think it's exclusively his fault. I mean, there's so much institutional capture by both parties of like the system, yes, that no matter who's in office, even if you have like a ostensive reformer, you won't see much in terms of change. And I think this is most apparent on Israel policy, because there the House always wins. And what is your current assessment of what's going on in Gaza? And do you think that conflict is going to continue on? And if so, do you think that it's going to result in some massive displacement, ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population there?
Well, that's exactly what the Israeli government wants, and they've pretty well said it. They've said that openly. Some of them have said it openly since October 7th. Of course, it has been the agenda for Israel to expand and push out non-Jews. I mean, and actually, I should say non-European Jews, but they that is their agenda for sure, and they're publicly talking about it now. Netanyahu's latest thing is, we're going to herd them into tiny places. We're taking over. We're going to rebuild it, and it's ours. It's ours. We're claiming this land, and they actually have done something similar in South Lebanon. Now they're actually building. The IDF engineers are building Israeli military facilities on the territory of southern Lebanon. They cleared it out, got rid of all the people, made them move north and west or east. And now they're just, settling. I mean, not with so much people, but the military settlements. And part of that is to protect the actual settlers that will follow and the ones on the border there. But yeah, so Israel's intention is clear, what you said. Now, what is the U.S. role? So I'll just tell you this, and I was very disconcerted by what Trump said. I think it was yesterday it's today Tuesday. Yeah, yesterday at the press conference where he had the NATO leadership and the EU leadership, and that he said, blowing his own horn, 6 wars ended in 6 months, and this will be the 7th. And he said, after this, I don't have any more. And I'm like, are you crazy? Because what about Gaza? Gaza is it's a book definition of genocide, book definition of ethnic cleansing. It would not be possible without American money and top cover, without American bombs and weapons and airplanes and surveillance and all of the assistance that we have been giving Israel, not just as a matter of policy, but the additional stuff we've given them since October 7th. So he is directly responsible for that. I hate to call it a war because they're not really that well armed. It's mostly men.
Yeah, it's a massacre. Yeah,
it's a massacre. So do you call that a war? I mean, I guess it's part of a war against the Arab world, but he acts like he's done. Ukraine's the big one, and after that we don't do anything. And I have nothing else. I've accomplished everything, and I'm like, that is insane because the whole world is fully aware of. We've all seen the pictures, the images. We've read the reports. We're following it. The whole world is up in arms about this, and Trump acts like there's not a conflict. Now, I think, and I don't like to think this, but it seems that it's not just Marion Edelman's money. It's not just the AIPAC lobby and the other big Jewish donors. I shouldn't say Jewish, they are, but mainly the Zionist donors. This political kind of the political program of expanding Israel at the cost of everything, reputation, economy, land, life, everything. None of this is worth it. We have to expand Israel. We'll do it any way we can. And we're paying for it. The United States taxpayer is paying for it. Israel would not be able to do their genocide without our help. They would not be able to have survived the retaliation that Iran dished out on the 12-day war unless we went in there. And I guess Trump told them we were going to bomb and said, you need to stop it or we'll bomb more, or something like that. And he did that. But Israel was panicked. And Netanyahu was panicked. They took hits like Israel has never taken before. And this is on top of not just severe alienation of Israel and the global community, the BDS, the what is it, the boycott, divest movement, not to buy Israeli products, not to invest in Israeli projects. That's global, big time. It's hit their economy. The port of Eilat on the Red Sea has gone bankrupt, not the first time, but it's closed. It's absolutely closed. They have one main airport, and even the pathetic, what we would say, the pathetic Houthis are able to really disrupt operations out of the only airport there. So Iran has demonstrated they have the capability to really hit Israel hard, and they were doing it. This was a bad thing. And many Israelis who have second passports or an ability to get out of the country have left. People have moved their kids out of there, just like Benjamin Netanyahu's son lives in, I think, South Beach in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, other Israeli families don't want their kids fighting. I made a point in something that I wrote, I don't know, this maybe the weekend or maybe before, about, the IDF is a people's army in the sense of all the people have to serve in the army, right? It's a defensive, it's almost like a combination of National Guard and army at the same time. And of course, Israel's a very small country, 9 million people, but all these folks serve. But what this people's army is being asked to do, and they're not particularly well trained. This is an illusion that the most moral army, well, that clearly isn't it true, but they're also not the best trained army. And they're certainly not trained for the kind of task that they've been given in Gaza, which is to massacre and kill people, shoot kids. So the sociopathy is in that society is coming out. It's more and more visible, and we see it in the way the IDF operates, and we see it in how some of the IDF soldiers are coping or not coping with what they've been asked to do by their government. So basically what I'm saying is Israel's destroying itself in the continuation of their project. And instead of stopping, reassessing, doing something different, they're doubling down. They're going to finish Gaza and push those people into, I imagine, Egypt. Maybe they can get some other countries to do it, but they are going to get the surviving Palestinians out of there, out of Gaza anyway. And they're also, at the same time, we're not even talking about this, they're pushing them out of the West Bank too, very aggressively clearing out the West Bank of Palestinians there. Who's stopping them? We could stop it overnight. You know how Trump said, I can end the Ukrainian-Russian war in 24 hours. Remember he said that? He said it like 100 times.
Yeah.
And in theory, he could have done more because we were a major donor. I think numbers-wise, we are the biggest donor to Ukraine in terms of military. And we control NATO. It's not NATO's war without the United States. And we have encouraged it, funded it, and helped it go. But there is NATO funding and there is NATO interest. European countries want to keep fighting Russia. There's that. There is some money that would still come in. However, we're the only one that counts that gives Israel money, top cover at the UN, weapons out anything they want and more. And we do their bidding, as we did with the using up, I think, a fifth of our bunker buster bombs were used up when we bombed Iran's nuclear sites. So we don't care. American people thought those were for them. Well, they're not for them. They're for Israel. You need to wake up. Our military works for Israel. So this is a problem. This is a real problem. And it would be one thing if all of the stuff we're doing helped Israel, but it doesn't help them. It doesn't help them. They will not recover the trade that has been lost from just the way they've behaved and the goodwill that has been totally wasted globally. They'll never get that back. Not in our lifetimes. That will not come back. And the country itself may not even survive. I think somebody quoted Benjamin Netanyahu from many years ago saying he was worried that Israel would not make it to its 100th birthday. And I agree. I would never really, it's not my concern, and I never thought of it that way. But the way they're going, I think he's right. I think he's right.
Yeah, that's actually something I've also argued, because when you look at the clean break strategy in the greater Israel, it's kind of like a go for broke strategy, because Israel recognizes that ultimately they're a country that's reliant on the Jewish diaspora and the military and economic largesse of the United States and its NATO satrapies. And because of that, you add in also the growing ultra-Orthodox population in Israel, which is largely on the dole and doesn't serve in the IDF. You have a lot of these countervailing factors that make it really difficult for Israel in the long term to be a viable state. Also add in multipolarity as well. That these factors make it really difficult for Israel to act in the way it does right now. So they have to really consolidate and expand. Well, really, they have to expand at this point and then consolidate their gains, because one of the classic ways of trying to dissipate internal tensions in a country is by engaging in land grabs, because it satisfies all the angry parties. That's like those primordial Bronze Age way of doing things. But like, that's the thing. Israel is behaving in such a Bronze Age manner with regards to how it's conducting.
Yeah, that's true. Too, when you think about a country that's going broke, let's say, and I'm sure the Israeli strategists are fully aware of everything that I'm saying, okay, because I'm just going to run down a few things that are a problem. They haven't just lost goodwill globally. The youth, they are losing. Zionism is not a popular theory among Jewish youth. Okay, so that's not selling anymore. That's not something you can just tell you're a Zionist, and then they grow up, they turn 18, 19, they see some of this stuff, they go, oh, no, actually, I'm not a Zionist. So they're not winning on the ideological standpoint. Evangelical Christians are down to, I think it's only 23% of all Protestant Christians. They used to be much higher. They've lost amazingly. And their average age is over 50 something. And they're not recruiting very well themselves of young people in America. And of course, that the whole evangelical Christian thing is something Israel has been working on since before Ronald Reagan, but certainly the moral majority and a lot of this stuff very much of interest to Israel, because if Protestants who, especially evangelicals who go with the Schofield Bible and Israel is God's, God has put Israel here, and then I forget all the things that happened to Israel, but they see it as biblical. They see this state that was created by communists and socialists and Marxists as something biblical that they must defend at all costs. And the number of those people and their influence in Congress is diminishing. AIPAC, very, very effective. However, it's only effective when nobody talks about it. Everybody's talking about AIPAC. They will probably be fair. They'll probably be required to register as a foreign agent in the next several years. I would predict that. I think we're done.
Yeah. It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And so all of these tools that Israel has used to ensure that America's largesse is on their side and America's military is fighting their wars, which was is very evident, and it's part of the clean break too. They didn't imagine, we're going to take all these countries by ourselves back in 1990 or 1999, 1998 is when it was written. They weren't planning on doing this all themselves. The U.S. was going to do a lot of it for them, which we did. If you count the countries in the clean break that they needed to topple, we pretty well tried to topple all of them. And I think most of them ended up in worse shape after we got done with them. And Syria was really the last man standing, the last unified secular country standing. And now it is it's a conflict zone between Islamists and former Al-Qaeda, Druze, others minorities that are struggling for power and struggling for life. It's a mess. We did that. Thank you, President Trump. But it's not Trump. It's not Trump. I mean, we've been working on that. The CIA's been working on that for 20 years. So I'm not going to give Trump credit for that. But he's happy about it, which is idiotic. Which tells me that he's the same as all the other presidents, which means the powers that be have him firmly in hand, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I don't think things are looking good for Israel. And I think Israel knows this. Like you said, they're looking. Oh, and the resource grabs are not just land. It is not just strategic land like the Golan Heights that they now have both sides. It is the oil that belongs to Gaza, which is legitimate.
Yeah, the natural gas deposit.
Natural gas.
That's an interesting factoid about Gaza. They found some stuff right off the shore. So yeah,
for sure. And the other thing is, now this is, people say this is really dumb and everything, but what is the trench between Egypt and the canal? The canal in Egypt that goes to Suez. The Suez Canal, right? The Suez Canal is built a long time ago. I mean, the 50s. Remember France, England?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the Suez was a great thing, but the Suez is dated now. It's not as wide. It's not as good for the kind of ships we have, and it's always piled up, jammed up, and also the profit goes to Egypt, right? This is, I think, 8 or 9 billion a year on a good year that Egypt gets in fees because they benefit from the Suez. Well, Ben Gurion, founder of Israel, terrorist, visionary. He had an idea for a canal that would go from the Red Sea, like kind of where Port of Eilat is, and cut across the Mediterranean, and it would be longer than the Suez, and you really couldn't do it you couldn't dig through those mountains and make a thing. It was unfeasible when Ben Gurion visualized this. Couldn't afford it, couldn't do it. We didn't have the technology, but you could do it. And you could run it right down the middle of Gaza, which would be the shortest way to come from the Red Sea across to the Mediterranean, cutting Gaza in half. And actually, they had a corridor, I forget the name of the corridor, that was established, which would have been right there where the pathway for a potential Ben Gurion canal would be. Anyway, how do you get a canal like that? Well, you have to use bunker busters or subground, below ground atomic weapons to blow up to do this. It's a major, major project. But there's not a lot of people in the Negev desert. And if they get rid of all the Gazans, there won't be any Gazans there either. So, whatnot. So what's not to love about these huge debt-funded projects? This is something I think Israel is saying, it's not just that we need more land and we have to keep our people in their socialist dependency, which they are, and everybody hates us, but I bet they won't hate us when we have a canal, and I bet they won't hate us when we're selling them natural gas that belongs to the Gazans. The only problem is there's Gazans, so let's get rid of them. And I think it's extremely brutal, Bronze Age, I guess. It's certainly a pre-Christian type of attitude for sure.
Yes, and now let's talk about Iran, because Israel is mired in all these conflicts in Gaza, Lebanon, South Syria, and inevitably Iran, because most of these areas are part of Iran's so-called axis of resistance, and also in Yemen too.
Oh yeah,
because they've recently bombed Yemen.
Yes.
Do you think that the so-called 12-day war was merely just the first act of like a direct conflict between Israel and Iran that will continue to simmer as the months go by?
Well, the people in Iran seem to think, the leadership and intelligence people in Iran seem to believe that they will be attacked again at any time. And Israel is happy to let them believe that. But I think that Israel maybe is going to have to do, it's kind of like, remember when they did the pagers, the exploding pagers for Hezbollah, in Lebanon? And it was a brilliant type of subterfuge, the exploding pagers. But once you do a project like that, you really can't do something like that a second time.
Again, yeah.
Because it's like, that is such a spectacular thing that now your target is wise to you in many ways. And they also revamp their system so that the security flaws that enabled you to succeed are no longer there. Well, kind of what Israel did with the 12-day war, if you want to call it that, that was kind of a cosmetic name for that thing. But when Israel attacked, they also, of course, had in place Mossad agents and reporters, had a lot of Afghan guys working for them, different things. And they attacked not just military targets, but they certainly attempted to decapitate the military, intelligence, scientific, and political leadership of Iran. Is a decapitation, in addition to overwhelming the air defenses and targeting the long-range missile batteries and whatever. So that went fine, and they thought it was going to be a big win, but Iran has been on the receiving ends of these for some time. They recovered quickly, and at that point began lobbing of missiles that could overwhelm, and did overwhelm, all three layers of the air defense of Israel, the Golden Dome, I think the Arrow system, I forget the names of the systems, and they hit huge military targets. Some of them were military targets that were sitting underneath hospitals, of course, but they hit these targets and they damaged it. They scared the living bejesus out of a lot of Israelis who had never really experienced that level of sustained attack. So it seems like they had to put an end to that war pretty quick, and before more was damaged in Israel. So, and what did Iran do after that? After the 12-day war ended? Well, they purged every Israeli worker, not worker, but, the intelligence, the folks that were responsible for surveilling inside of Iran. Of course, obviously anybody with a Mossad connection. And they arrested them, kicked them out, threw them in jail. Who knows what they did to them, but they got rid of them. And they put the fear of God into those they couldn't catch. So that really hurts Israel's ability to do the same thing again. See, it's like, who was it? Herodotus. You can't put your toe in the same river twice because the river flows. Yeah. And that's so.
Lightning only strikes twice. Once, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so Israel's at a disadvantage in picking a big fight with Iran. And I think that's actually why Trump keeps insisting, contrary to all evidence, that his strikes with the B-2s and 1/5 of our inventory of bunker buster bombs, he keeps saying, oh, I totally destroyed all their nuclear capability. And of course, no, no, you didn't. Your own intel is telling you didn't. But why does he keep saying that? Because I think the idea is if this is the case, Israel doesn't need to bomb Iran again. But the real thing is Israel can't afford to bomb Iran again. They can't afford, they'd have to spend a lot of time rebuilding the kind of subterfuge that they use this time to great benefit, because nothing stays the same. Iran is learning, and Iran also has had many opportunities to learn. I mean, think about how many times Israel has bombed its neighbors. Many of those neighbors are allies of Iran. So everything that you do, all your enemies learn from it. And of course, this is for the U.S. as well. The rest of the world loves to watch the U.S. engage because we learn. They learn about how we do business, and they can prepare for it. They can counter it. And if they're smart, they can counter it without war. And I think this is what so many of the countries are figuring. And of course, back to the monetary thing, what's the best way to protect yourself from having the U.S. dollar used against you? Well, why don't you have an alternative currency that the U.S. dollar is ineffective against? So all those things are happening, and it's good. It's good, but it's not good for the American empire. And Trump is very imperial. His MAGA was all about America first. And that's what his voters thought they were getting. They thought they were getting America first, bring back the troops. But he talks like he thinks he's a great empire, a great emperor who will have a legacy of a strengthened empire. Very strange to me.
Yes, definitely. We are, as multipolarity crystallizes, it's going to become more and more apparent that the U.S. has an overstretched empire, and especially in the realm of great power conflict, which really transitions well into like the latest meeting between Vladimir Putin and Trump in Alaska during that summit. What did you make of that encounter? And do you think that it will actually lead to a peaceful conclusion of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict?
Well, I'd like to hope that it does. It's a good thing that he is meeting with Putin. Multiple times he's talked to him and met him, I think, including in his prior presidency. And Putin, he gives these lectures. We saw the one that he gave to Tucker Carlson. Mm-hmm. So I think he's educated Trump a little bit in why Russia is doing this, why they did it, why they felt they had to do it. It was the responsibility to protect their people in the Donbass. And And also the fact that the United States lied and the NATO lied about not expanding NATO up to Russia's borders. So he has a pretty legit case, and he's made that case to Trump multiple times. So I think Trump understands what's going on, and Trump wants the killing to end, he says. But I've noticed that Trump really, in any significant way, has reduced aid to Ukraine. Trump is talking about, doing not just, he says, I'm not going to do boots on the ground, but he certainly wishes to have Ukraine buy weapons from the United States. He's looking at a wall between Ukraine and Russia, wherever that wall, that border ends up being, that Ukraine will be a U.S. appendage, a NATO appendage, even if it's not a NATO member. And of course, that's not acceptable. That is not acceptable to Russia. And Russia has the upper hand in this war. Well, I talked to a guy at the same meeting we were at on Saturday, and he says Russia will take Odessa. They will continue to go because Zelensky is not in a position of legit power in his country, vis-a-vis the hardliners, the Nazis, or whatever. Mm-hmm. He's not in a position to accept trading territory and demilitarizing and becoming neutral. They don't want to do that. They're not going to let Zelensky do that. And plus, the Duma itself, not the Duma. What is it they call the parliament in Ukraine? It's not a Duma.
I think it's the Rada or something.
Rada. Yeah, it's a Rada. Well, the Rada also has suspended their elections, just as Zelensky has suspended his elections. So elections need to happen. And prior to those elections happening, honestly, I don't see who Putin can deal with here, because the Rada has already passed constitutional changes regarding what territory they think is part of Ukraine. They've passed constitutional changes regarding Russian language, eliminating it. They have demonized Russians, even though they're all Slavic brothers. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know. I think with Zelensky in place prior to elections, which are very difficult to hold right now in Ukraine, but they're kind of in a catch-22. So I think Russia will continue. And also there are a whole sector of voices, political sectors, I guess you could say, in Russia that want to end this war by ending Ukraine. They
settling on the battlefield.
Yeah. And also that Russia has invested dearly in doing this. So, if you invest, you remember when Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan, of course, very awkwardly done, but we should have left Afghanistan many, many, many years. We should have never gone to Afghanistan. But there were people in this country, probably a lot of Republicans who don't like Biden, and they were going, "Oh, we should have won that. We should have stayed there." And the same thing, there were voices like that in Vietnam. Why did we pull out of Vietnam? All we had to do was just bomb them into the Stone Age. We could have done that. There are always these voices that say, we can't accept these sunk costs. We really have to go for broke here. And those voices are in Russia as well. And that does not bode well, particularly as the Ukrainian military is really every day it's not much. There's not a lot left of it. And every day a little bit more is taken. It's a little bit less. So Zelensky's in a tough place. He's vulnerable. If he agrees to do this, they'll probably whack him in his own country, and they can get to him. And they can get to him. It's not like, he can have protection of some sort. They'll get to him. So he knows this. When I heard he was coming to Washington on Monday, I was hoping that in the message that Trump sent to him, they said, "Ellen, bring your stuff, pack your bags," because that would be the safest thing for him to do, is to get out of there. And the Rada could appoint a president temporary, and they could hold elections. And then those people could settle. They could settle the war. It needs to be settled. It needs to be ended. But Ukraine also needs to be neutral. It cannot be a part of NATO. It should not have an aggressive army. Its best protection is to be a neutral state. That's the best thing for it. It's the best thing for all. I would like to, it'd be the best thing for America to be a neutral state too, instead of telling the whole world how to live and what to do and where they can shop. This is This is not good. It's not freedom. And Ukraine deserves freedom just like everybody else. But a neutral state would be the best way to go. And they're not going to get that with Zelensky. He is not
100%, no.
to do that. No.
One thing I'd also add as well, to paraphrase what the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, that the U.S. is agreement incapable, and the West in general. And because of that, I think there's going to be very little desire on the Russians to automatically instantly sign off on a diplomatic agreement. Yeah. I think they'd have to get really strong guarantees for that to happen, and instead they may just settle it on the battlefield, because that's where it's going to ultimately, this conflict is going to come to a close. Because if you look at the Minsk agreements and the other promises that the West has made to Russia, there's not much of an incentive for Russia to continue going that route, especially if they're just going to end up getting betrayed in the end.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And even if Putin himself likes Trump and thinks, hey, Trump wants peace, because Putin said that. I mean, he said, I think Trump wants peace. He's still dealing with the U.S. deep state. He's still dealing with the snakes in NATO, and they don't want peace.
What happens after Trump?
Yeah, no kidding. And also Trump himself is, I don't know if he's aware of this or not, but when you are getting ready for the 6th or 7th diplomatic meeting with Iran, and you had a meeting and now you've got another meeting, and in between those two meetings, you decide to go bunker buster him with a $2 or $3 billion set of attacks, which he did. And then you boast about it afterwards. You say, yeah, they didn't see that coming. Guess what? We got your number, Mr. Trump. You are not to be trusted. So, and also in diplomacy, it really is like Reagan said, you can trust, but you need to verify. And when they try to verify Trump's, where he's going, what he's capable of, the track record Trump has shown so far is one that he is unpredictable. He says he can say, I want peace and I want to end the killing. And then he can kill people. And it's that's just the hand of the clock moved, and he can go back to either position. So that's not something you can trust at all. And if I was a foreign country dealing with the United States, I would not trust them. And also, we have a big problem in our country with deep state. Who's really in control? Which we always ask that question, certainly under Biden, because Biden was infirm. He was acting weird. We weren't quite sure who's running the country. But really, when you look back at many of our presidents, who's running our country, we're not really sure. And so the foreign countries, most of them aren't sure either. Although I imagine China and Russia have a pretty good idea.
Yep.
I mean, they're watching us enough with professional analysts. They understand history. So I think they can put it in perspective. And of course, Israel is running a lot of our government. And what is Israel's view towards ending the war in Ukraine? Right now, as long as the war in Ukraine is the top interest item in the news and Donald Trump's interest item, and it's what everybody's reporting on, we're not talking about Gaza. So if I was Netanyahu, I would say, yeah, let's keep it in the news, but keep the war going. It helps Israel.
Indeed. Well, things look like they're up in the air, but it also seems that there's still a good deal of inertia when it comes to any type of move toward recalibrating U.S. foreign policy and moving it in a more non-interventionist, realist direction.
That's right. I agree.
Anyways, Karen, thank you so much for coming on the show. And before you leave, where can listeners of Headline Geopolitics follow your work?
I pretty much have everything at LouRockwell.com, and then I have everything on my Substack. So it's the Karen Kwiatkowski Substack, whatever. And where else? Judge Knapp. JudgeKnapp.com. My op.
Yeah, you were a regular. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he has me on once a week, which is really nice. And I do post my op-eds and things on his website, so you can find them there sometimes. And every once in a while, somebody else will pick them up, because RPI picked up one. The Ron Paul Institute picked up one I did last week, which I was really happy. So, yeah, it's out there. I don't do a podcast or any type of, I don't do a lot of video unless somebody invites me on their podcast. But But yeah, it's out there. But there's lots of voices that are, if you can become well informed on our foreign policy pretty easily. Go out there and look, and any of Judge Knapp's guests, or take all their guests and look at what they're doing. You'll have a good picture of all that. And the critique, of course, is always just what you said. Why can't we have a non-interventionist foreign policy? That would be better for us. It would be cheaper for us. It would be better for the American people. It would help with every aspect of the American economy. Every aspect of the American social support system would all be improved with a non-interventionist foreign policy. So Democrats and Republicans alike should be jumping on that with 2 feet, but they're not. Not at all.
Indeed, there are many challenges that lie ahead, but thanks to your work and the work of countless other people, I believe that we are on the cusp of some change in the near future. We just have to keep trucking along. And again, thank you for taking the time out of your evening. And for those who want to follow your work, we will have the links to all of Karen's articles and media appearances in the show notes. And again, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I'm José Niño, and this is Headline Geopolitics.